My own daughter hid me away on the night of the party, as if I were a disgrace. What she didn't know is that, on that very same night, I would become the true master of the celebration. Before I go on, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because every time we share stories like this, we prove that no one has the right to erase anyone's dignity. I stood in front of the mansion's glowing doorway, watching the golden lights flicker as if mocking me. Classical music spilled out through the tall windows, mixed with laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Inside, everyone was celebrating. Outside, I was nothing more than a name scratched off the list. The security guard, dressed in a flawless black suit, looked me over. My brown coat was worn, the seams on the shoulder already giving way. He asked for my name, coldly, without lifting his eyes from the clipboard. I told him. His thick finger ran down the list. He shook his head and said, almost impatiently, "Sorry, sir, your name isn't here." That sentence cut deeper than the December wind. I wasn't just a stranger being turned away. I was the father of the hostess. That's when Olivia appeared, my daughter. Her blue dress shimmered under the Christmas lights, her hair pinned in perfect waves, and her artificial smile still fixed for the guests. But when she saw me, that smile cracked, just for a second, too quick for the others to notice, slow enough to rip me apart inside. She stepped closer and whispered, without meeting my eyes, "Dad, go through the back. Nobody needs to see you right now." That whisper was louder than any scream. My stomach clenched. The weight of all those years, every brick I had laid in that house, every night I had worked late so she could live in comfort, crashed down on me. And there she was, my daughter, asking me to sneak in like a stain on the perfect life she was trying to show the world. Behind her stood Daniel, the arrogant husband, arms crossed, his mouth twisted in something between a smirk and a sneer. I knew that look, the look of someone who believes a man like me doesn't deserve a place in all that false glitter. The guard waited, Olivia waited, and I just stood there. Inside me, a storm, shame, anger, wounded pride, and a question pounding in my head. When did I stop being a father and start being a burden? I took a deep breath, and I walked through the back, each step down the narrow corridor, smelling of food and cheap liquor, made the elegant music from the main hall sound even louder. It felt like there were two worlds divided by a thin wall, their world and the corner where I was supposed to stay hidden. In the kitchen, staff rushed back and forth. Nobody noticed me. Nobody knew that the man with rough hands, standing silently in the shadows, was the father of the lady of the house, the father of the woman who was glowing in the grand hall. My chest burned, but along with the pain came a quiet certainty. I hadn't crossed that frozen city on a bus just to be a shadow. I hadn't built that house with my own hands just to be remembered as an intruder. I hadn't survived years of silence and contempt just to accept one more humiliation. They thought they could hide me, but the night wasn't over yet. The main hall looked like something out of a Christmas magazine cover. Crystal chandeliers spread golden light over the room, reflecting off red and silver ornaments that dangled in long, glittering ribbons from the ceiling. A tree nearly 10 feet tall stood in the center, dripping with shiny baubles and bows, imposing like the throne of the evening. The air was thick with the scent of expensive wine mixed with the sweet perfume of vanilla candles scattered in every corner. Guests moved through the hall like pieces on a luxurious chessboard, men in dark suits with pressed lapels, champagne glasses delicately balanced in their hands, women in long gowns, jewelry flashing like tiny lightning bolts, polite laughter, calculating looks, greetings dripping with fake warmth. And there, at the center of it all, stood Olivia, my daughter. She shone as the perfect hostess. The deep blue dress hugged her waist flawlessly. The subtle but expensive jewelry sparkled against her pale skin, and every movement seemed rehearsed to impress. Her gestures were soft, her voice sweet, but her eyes carried something I'd known since she was little: ambition, that hunger to be accepted by a circle that to me was nothing more than theater. Beside her, always one step back, was Daniel Miller, her husband. Tall, stiff posture, a spotless suit that probably cost more than I earned in an entire month when I was his age. Daniel smiled with his lips, but never with his eyes. He wore the face of a man who considered himself above everyone else, the kind who shakes your hand while measuring the price of your watch. He noticed everything, every guest, every detail, every word, and whenever his eyes landed on me, even from across the room, I could feel his disapproval. He never said it outright, but to Daniel, I was nothing more than the poor father of the perfect wife, an inconvenient shadow, spoiling the image he wanted to sell to the world. I walked through the crowd, invisible. No one asked who I was. No one tried to strike up a conversation. I was just another out-of-place body at their glamorous party, until I heard it. "Olivia, the house looks amazing. You really have such great taste." A woman in a sparkling emerald green dress gushed with admiration. My daughter smiled, straightened her posture, and with false modesty she replied, "Oh, thank you. Daniel and I took care of every detail." My heart skipped a beat. Every detail. I could point to every wall, every window, every step of the grand staircase and tell exactly when and how I had built it. I remembered the nights when sawdust clung to my skin, the calluses stinging in the cold, the ache in my back after hauling beams of wood. And now, in front of everyone, she spoke as if it had all been born from the luxury she flaunted at her husband's side. I swallowed hard, stayed silent, but inside, something had already started to stir. As I moved through the hall, I noticed more things. I didn't belong there, not among crystal glasses or rehearsed laughter. I felt like an intruder in a museum of wealth. And yet, every corner of that house bore my mark. Olivia kept up her performance, carefully. Measured hugs, stories of trips to Europe, talk of fancy dinners in New York. She spoke as if she had been born into that world, as if she had never known the small wooden house where she grew up, or the father who worked endless nights to buy her the prom dress she wanted so badly. Across the room, I caught discreet glances. Some people seemed to sense something out of place. An older woman with silver hair stared at me for a few seconds, maybe trying to guess who I was. But the moment our eyes met, she looked away quickly, like someone who realized they weren't supposed to pay attention. That's how I was being treated, like a detail to be ignored. And yet, in the middle of all that luxury, I felt something else growing inside me. It wasn't just pain. It wasn't just shame. It was a quiet certainty. I didn't belong to that theater, but that theater would never exist without me. My eyes traveled up the grand staircase, imposing, draped in golden ornaments. I remembered the day I installed every railing, sweat dripping from my forehead, the pride I felt watching Olivia climb those steps as a little girl, her hair loose, running, laughing out loud. That memory cut like a blade, and I thought, if they won't give me a voice, I'll take my own. The party went on, laughter, toasts, the clinking of glasses, but inside me, something had shifted. I was no longer just wounded. I was ready, and without anyone noticing, the clock of destiny began to tick. As I walked through that grand hall, invisible to almost everyone, a flood of memories nearly drowned me. Every corner of that house was an open scar, a reminder that my effort, my story, and my dignity had been erased from the memory of my own daughter. The house everyone praised so enthusiastically, the chandeliers, the walls, the towering staircase, didn't come from Daniel's pocket, nor from Olivia's ambitious mind. It was born from my hands. I remember it like it was yesterday, the empty lot, covered in tall weeds and stones. I cleared it myself with a shovel too old to handle the work. The neighbors said I was crazy to build a house that size alone, but I never believed in limits. On weekends, while my co-workers rested, I was there. Wood, bricks, cement. The hammer was my constant companion, echoing late into the night. I remember the smell of freshly cut pine, the dust sticking to my skin, the blood on my hands from lifting beams too heavy for one man. And it wasn't just sweat, it was love. Every nail I drove in, I thought of Olivia. I pictured her running through the hallways, hiding behind doors, her laughter echoing off the walls, the bedroom filled with college posters, the staircase creaking from so much use. I didn't just give my daughter a roof, I gave her a home, but time passed. And what I saw as a home, she began to see only as a stepping stone to something bigger. As a child, Olivia ran to me with shining eyes. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want you to build me a house too." She'd say it, wrapped around my neck, smelling of sun and dirt. And I believed her. I believed that no matter how much the world tried to diminish me, she would always see me as the man who never gave up. But the years took that sparkle away. As a teenager, she began to feel ashamed of my work. I'd show up at her school still covered in cement dust, and I saw the way she'd look away when her friends were nearby. She never said a word, but I noticed. Later, when she went to college, it got worse. Olivia didn't want me at her graduations. She said I didn't need to bother, that everything was already taken care of. But I knew. She didn't want the world to see the father with calloused hands, simple clothes, and a working man's accent. Still, I never stopped supporting her. I worked double shifts to pay her tuition. I took side jobs at night, fixed neighbors' furniture, stayed up countless nights, and every time I handed her the money, all she said was, "Thanks, Dad," without even looking up. I thought it was fine. I thought that was just how it was. But the truth is, little by little, I became invisible to her. And now that Christmas night, the confirmation was right in front of me. I heard a group of guests praising the floor of the living room. "It's gorgeous, Olivia. Looks like something out of a magazine." She smiled, as always. And I remembered the day I laid each plank of that floor. It was winter. My hands hurt so badly from the cold, I had to warm them over a candle flame just to keep working. The smell of burned wood mixed with sawdust. Olivia was only 6, standing beside me, watching. "Does it hurt, Daddy?" "A little, but when it's finished, you'll be able to run around in here." She laughed. That day, I thought I wasn't just building a house. I was building memories that would last forever. But now, hearing her accept the compliments as if they were her own effort, something stabbed deep in my chest. I had been wrong. On the other side of the hall, Daniel shook hands with a businessman, saying loudly, "Olivia and I planned every single detail together. We're so proud to welcome you all here." Planned, maybe. But who built it, who bled, who cried alone within these walls, was me, and no one there knew. No one imagined that the quiet old man in the kitchen corner was the true foundation of that night. As I walked, hearing my own shoes echo weakly against the very floor I had laid, I thought, they may have forgotten me, but the walls haven't. Every brick knows who put it there. And that certainty, silent and unyielding, was the only thing keeping me from breaking down in that moment. I might be invisible to them, but not to the truth. And I knew, sooner or later, the truth would come out. I already knew I wasn't welcome. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment when rejection became public. The party carried on. Violins played a gentle melody, while waiters weaved through with silver trays, balancing champagne flutes and appetizers that looked like little works of art. I tried to stay invisible, leaning against a side door, watching Olivia's perfect life unfold from a distance. Suddenly, I heard the clink of a glass being lifted. The hall fell silent. Daniel, my son-in-law, stepped onto a small platform near the fireplace, smiling like a politician on campaign. "I want to thank everyone for being here on this special night," he said, voice steady and rehearsed. "It's such an honor to welcome each of you into this house that represents the future of our family." Applause, toasts, laughter, but something inside me trembled. The future of our family. I was standing there, hidden in the shadows, and no one even knew I existed. A guest beside me whispered, "That Miller is really impressive. Everything here has his touch." I swallowed hard. I wanted to shout, "No, this is my touch. These walls are mine. This staircase is mine." But I stayed silent, and then it happened. A waiter recognized me from outside and whispered something to another staff member. Seconds later, a tall, broad-shouldered security guard headed straight toward me. "Sir, please come with me." Every head turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the piano seemed to lose its sound. "Is there a problem?" I asked cautiously. "I need you to come with me," the guard replied, voice sharp. Olivia noticed. Her face went pale for an instant. She dropped her glass and hurried over. She grabbed my arm gently, but her words came out like a knife. "Dad, please don't make a scene. It's better if you wait in the kitchen. The party is full of important people." I felt my whole body go cold. She didn't just want to hide me. She wanted to erase me. The silence in the hall was suffocating. Some guests whispered, others just watched, curious, as if they were witnessing an uncomfortable play unfold. I could have shouted right then. I could have slammed the table and told everyone that the only reason that house even existed was because of me, but I didn't. I simply let her guide me like I was an intruder. We walked down the corridor, and every step echoed like an accusation. I looked at the walls and remembered the day I painted each of them myself, while Olivia studied for her college exams. I remembered the pride I felt when I finished, and she ran through the rooms shouting that it was the most beautiful house in the world. And now, years later, she reduced me to nothing more than a nuisance to be hidden away. In the kitchen, Olivia let go of me like someone dropping a heavy weight. "Please, Dad, try to understand. This just isn't your place." Her voice was calm, but it cut like a sentence. She rushed back to the music, the toasts, the admiring eyes. I stayed there, surrounded by waiters hurrying back and forth, none of them even looking at me. That was when something shifted inside me. The humiliation was no longer just pain. It was fuel. My heart was pounding. My breath was heavy. I knew I couldn't leave that party the same way I had entered. If I accepted it, it would be the end. Proof that yes, I had truly become invisible, even to my own daughter. I didn't say a word. I didn't cause a scene. But inside, a silent promise was born. They were going to hear my voice. They were going to remember who I was. The party went on. But for me, the game had changed. And what about you? Have you ever been in a moment where someone you loved tried to hide you, as if they were ashamed of you? Share it in the comments. Your voice matters, and when you subscribe, we prove together that no one has the right to erase anyone's story. After being dragged into the kitchen like a burden, I tried to compose myself. I leaned my hands against the cold marble counter and took a deep breath. The clatter of dishes, the ringing of silverware, the rush of waiters, it all blended into a chaotic symphony around me. I was just another shadow in that hidden space, while on the other side of the wall, my daughter smiled for the world. For a few minutes, I thought about staying there until it all ended, swallowing the shame in silence, like I had so many times before. But something in me wouldn't allow it. It was as if every muffled laugh from the hall pushed me back out. So I straightened my worn coat on my shoulders and started walking through the corridors again. It didn't take long to notice. With every step, every gesture, I received small doses of disdain, bitter drops that together became an ocean. First, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my worn shoes. She gave me a slight smile, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile that hides judgment. She turned her face away quickly, as if preferring to forget what she had just seen. Further ahead, a group of young people chatted near the staircase. I stopped a few feet away, just listening. One of them said, "Daniel really knows how to host. Everything is so tasteful." A girl added, laughing, "And Olivia looks stunning. She was born for this." My fists tightened. They spoke of my daughter as if she had reinvented herself from nothing, as if her story had only begun with Daniel. Not a word about the past, about the roots, about the man who built every piece of that house. I kept walking. In the dining room, I saw Daniel being praised for the furniture. "Such unique pieces," someone said. He raised his glass and confirmed proudly. My eyes fell on the central table, the same table I had carved 20 years earlier from wood I salvaged from an abandoned site. I remembered the splinters cutting my hands, the strong smell of varnish that filled the house for days. Olivia had been a teenager then. I remembered her running her hand over the polished wood and saying, "Dad, it looks like something out of a movie." Now, in front of everyone, that table was nothing more than another trophy in Daniel's collection, and I was invisible. I walked into the back garden. A group of businessmen smoked thick cigars, the strong smell spreading into the cold night air. One of them pointed to the illuminated balcony and asked, "Beautiful architectural design. Who is responsible for it?" Daniel smiled, took a puff of his cigar, and replied, "Oh, we hired the best. It was a big investment, but it was worth it." The men laughed and toasted. I almost laughed too, but not from joy, from the cruel irony. The best? I still remembered the nights I mixed cement with my own hands to raise that balcony. Alone, no architect, no engineer, just the strength of necessity and the desire to give my daughter something she could call home. The small injustices never stopped. Every conversation I overheard was another brick of silence built against me. Every compliment to Daniel was a theft of memory. Every look of disdain was a clear message. You don't belong here. The most painful part, though, was seeing Olivia play along so naturally. She didn't look for me, didn't include me in a single conversation. Whenever our eyes met across the room, she looked away quickly, like someone afraid of being caught. It was as if my presence threatened the carefully constructed world she lived in, a world of appearances, where I was the one piece that didn't fit. And that's when I realized the greater truth. The party wasn't just a Christmas celebration. It was a stage where my daughter and her husband performed a curated version of life, one stripped of anything that might seem imperfect. And I was the imperfection that had to be hidden. But there was something they didn't know. I might have been silent, but I wasn't defeated. Every swallowed word, every whispered humiliation, every sideways glance, all of it was being stored inside me, like embers hidden under ash, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I knew the night hadn't shown its true climax yet, and when the time came, no one there would be able to erase the weight of the truth. My heart still raced. With each humiliation, with each scornful look, something inside me burned. But it wasn't just pain. It was the fire of certainty. I knew I couldn't leave that party the way I had entered. I walked slowly through the glowing corridors, trying to remain unseen. The voices of the guests filled the air with false euphoria, as if they were all acting in rehearsed roles. With every laugh, every toast, the silence around me felt heavier. But inside, the decision had already been made. I would not be erased. That's when my steps led me to the mansion's study. The door was ajar, the yellow lamplight casting long shadows across the walls lined with bookshelves. I slipped inside unnoticed. The smell of old leather and polished wood brought back memories I thought I had buried. In the corner, on top of a table, I saw something that made me stop. A framed photograph. I walked closer. It was a simple image. Me, covered in sawdust, sweating, holding little Olivia in my arms. Behind us, the newly built house. The same house that now shone as a symbol of wealth and luxury. I ran my hand over the cold glass of the frame. My eyes burned. That photo wasn't there by accident. Maybe Olivia had kept it, out of nostalgia, or maybe out of guilt. But the fact remained. Proof of everything I had done still existed. At that moment, something clicked inside me. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to beg for recognition. All I needed to do was show the truth. I tucked the photograph under my arm and left the study with steady steps. But it wasn't just the photo. As I walked back through the hall, I saw every detail as if it were a map of memories. The railing of the staircase, which I had sanded until my hands bled. The living room floor, where Olivia had taken her first steps. The garden, where I had planted the first trees that now served as scenery for guests smoking expensive cigars. Everything there was a silent witness to my work. Everything there was proof of who I was. Meanwhile, across the hall, Olivia kept up her performance. I saw her smile as she received praise for every perfect detail of the evening. Her smile looked elegant, but I noticed the tension in her jaw. Deep down, she knew my presence could tear down the entire facade. And that, more than anything, gave me strength. I sat in an armchair in the corner, clutching the frame against my chest. No one noticed. No one asked anything. To them, I was still just a man out of place. But inside me, the setting was shifting. I was no longer the ashamed father. I was the man holding in his hands the key to turning the night upside down. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. I remembered every sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the calluses that never healed, the times I hid my pain so my daughter wouldn't worry. I remembered how little Olivia once said she wanted to be like me, and now, as an adult, she was trying to bury me alive under her new world of luxury. The taste of bitterness filled my mouth, but with it came something unexpected, the taste of decision. I didn't plan beautiful words. I didn't imagine long speeches. I knew that when the moment came, one gesture would be enough. Showing what I held in my hands would be enough to tear down every mask in that room. In that silence, sitting with the photograph in my lap, I realized I didn't need her to acknowledge me. I didn't need Daniel to accept me. I just needed to remind everyone, and myself, who I really was. When the clock struck 10, the clinking of glasses announcing a new toast made me open my eyes. The time had come. I stood, adjusted my worn coat, and walked back toward the main hall. Each step was a step toward the truth. Each beat of my heart was a silent announcement that the turning point was near. I didn't say a word. I didn't warn anyone, but deep down, I knew. When I crossed that room with the photograph raised high, nothing would ever be the same. The hall was alive with festivity. The sound of violins filled the air, mingled with the buzz of animated conversations and the clinking of crystal glasses. The glow of chandeliers reflected in the guests' eyes as they moved like pieces in a grand theater. Everything looked perfect, orchestrated. But for me, time moved differently. I held the frame with both hands, the cold glass pressed against my chest. I could feel my heartbeat pounding with each step, like a war drum announcing the inevitable. I couldn't wait any longer, not after everything I had seen, not after everything I had heard. I took a deep breath and walked toward the center of the hall. Each step felt heavier than the last. The music played on, but in my mind there was no sound, only the echo of my own thought. The time has come. The time has come. Some guests began to notice me. Curious glances turned first discreet, then sharper. Whispers rippled through the room like a wave building before it breaks. Olivia was the first to react. She stood by the fireplace, laughing beside two women in glittering gowns. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and her smile vanished as if it had never been there. She stumbled forward, nearly tripping on her dress. "Dad, not now." Her voice was low, almost a desperate plea. Daniel, beside her, pressed his lips together and folded his arms, maintaining his usual arrogant posture, but I caught the discomfort in the way his jaw tightened. He knew I carried something. I kept walking. I didn't speed up. I didn't hesitate. I just advanced toward the small marble platform where Daniel had toasted earlier. I climbed a single step. Dozens of eyes fixed on me. The hall fell silent. The music stopped. The only sound was the faint creak of the floor beneath my shoes. I raised the frame. The reflection of the chandeliers glimmered across the glass. For a moment, no one understood. All they saw was a simple man in worn clothes interrupting the party with an old object in his hands. But slowly, guests leaned closer, squinting, trying to see the image inside the photograph. It was me, younger, covered in sawdust, sweat running down my face, and in my arms, A little girl with a wide smile, Olivia. Behind us, the freshly built house, still unpainted, raw but standing tall. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Is that him? Did he build the house? Olivia tried to react. She rushed toward me, reaching out to snatch the frame. Dad, please don't do this. But I stepped back and lifted the photo higher. I looked at her. I looked at Daniel, and then at everyone. My eyes were wet, but my voice came out steady, almost sharp. You raise your glasses in this house tonight, but know this. Every brick, every beam, every inch of these walls carries my hands. I am not a guest. I am the owner of this celebration. The silence was absolute. I could hear only people's breathing, the stifled gasp of surprise, the distant crash of a glass shattering on the floor. Olivia covered her mouth with her hand. Daniel tried to laugh, but the sound died before it began. His mask of superiority crumbled, revealing something closer to fear. The guests exchanged stunned looks. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stepped closer, straining to see the photograph, to piece together a story none of them had known until now. I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. The photo spoke for me. The walls spoke for me. Olivia's embarrassed silence spoke for me. I stood there, unmoving, holding the frame aloft like both a banner and a wound. And in that instant, I was no longer the hidden father. I was the truth no one could deny. The entire hall seemed frozen in time. I stood there, gripping the photograph as if it were both a trophy and a scar. My words still echoed. I am not a guest. I am the owner of this celebration. The sentence dropped into the room like a stone thrown into a silent lake. The sound reverberated in every glance, every frozen gesture. Rebecca, one of Olivia's friends, let out an audible gasp. A tall man in a gray suit shoved his hand into his pocket, uneasy, as if he no longer knew where to look. From the back, I heard someone whisper, "My God, was it really him who built all this?" Olivia stood frozen, her eyes glassy, her mouth slightly open, as if she had lost the ability to speak. Her glittering dress shimmered under the golden lights, but her fragile posture betrayed her, the woman who had seemed so confident moments earlier now trembled before everyone. Daniel tried to regain control. He straightened up, adjusted his tie, and forced a smile. Well, we all know this house is the result of work and investments. Let's not exaggerate. But his voice faltered. The echo of my words had stripped away any credibility he thought he still had. I stayed silent, staring at him, and it was that silence that weighed heavier than any scream. Some guests began to approach. "May I see the photo?" asked an older man with gray hair. I showed him. He studied it. His eyes softened. Then he looked at me and nodded with respect. That simple gesture spread. Others came closer. Murmurs rose. The story was beginning to be rewritten, right there in front of everyone. I felt the weight of years of humiliation slide from my shoulders. That moment wasn't just about me. It was about every silence I had swallowed, every time I allowed myself to be diminished, every moment I was treated like a burden. Now, finally, the tables had turned. Olivia tried to take a step toward me, but stopped midway. Her lips moved, but no words came. The image she had built, the perfect hostess, the woman of status, shattered into pieces before the very elite she had fought so hard to impress. I slowly lowered the photo, but I didn't look away from anyone, and I repeated, my voice even firmer, without the need to shout. "The house may be in your name, but the walls know who raised them." This time, there were no gasps. There was silence. A heavy silence that exposed a truth no one could deny. And in that instant, I realized the turning point wasn't only against Olivia and Daniel. It was against every stare that had diminished me, against every complicit silence, against every stifled laugh. I was no longer the invisible man. I was the living memory of that house, and no one could erase me. For a few seconds, no one knew what to do. The hall, once filled with laughter and toasts, now felt like a silent courtroom. All eyes were on me, and on Olivia and Daniel. The first reaction came from one of the oldest guests, a man with a white beard and serious eyes. He cleared his throat and spoke in a firm voice. "So, it was you who built this house?" I nodded, without lowering my head. He stepped closer, extended his hand, and shook mine firmly. "Congratulations, sir. This is the work of a master." That gesture was like a spark. Other guests followed. An elegant woman touched my arm and said softly, "Now it all makes sense. This house has a soul, and that can't be bought." Olivia shrank before the scene. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't dare interrupt. The world she had built, a world where her humble past didn't exist, collapsed in front of everyone. Daniel, on the other hand, still tried to keep up appearances. "Well, let's not forget, everyone knows my investment was fundamental." But his voice lost strength the moment he realized no one was listening anymore. The guests, once eager for his smiles, now looked at him with distrust. The confident lawyer, the self-assured host, seemed to shrink with every passing second. An awkward silence spread around him, and for the first time, Daniel seemed small. I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to humiliate anyone. The simple fact of being there, of showing the truth, had already changed the course of the night. Guests whispered among themselves. I caught fragments. What a shame. Hiding her own father. He should be at the head of the table. Ingratitude has a price. Every whisper was a sentence. Not against me, but against Olivia and Daniel. Finally, my daughter stepped forward. Her hands trembled. Her face flushed with shame. "Dad," her voice broke. I didn't mean to," but she never finished. The weight of the other's eyes silenced her. That was when I realized something that cut me deeply, and yet set me free. Olivia was no longer the little girl who used to run through those halls, proud of her father. She had chosen another path, and on that path, I didn't fit. But now, in front of everyone, she couldn't escape the truth. The judgment didn't come from me. It came from the entire room, from the disappointed expressions, the condemning stares, the heavy atmosphere that turned the party into something unrecognizable. Daniel withdrew into himself. Olivia wept in silence. And I, for the first time in many years, didn't need to prove anything. The truth had already done it for me. The party never returned to what it was. The violins tried to resume their melody, but the sound felt off, out of place, as if the music itself carried the shame that hung in the air. I stepped down from the marble platform slowly, still holding the photograph. The guests parted to make way, not out of rejection, but out of respect. Some nodded discreetly. Others just stared in silence, with a mixture of admiration and awe. Olivia said nothing more. She sat by the fireplace, the blue dress crumpled in her hands, her eyes red from crying. Daniel remained stiff, but his mask of confidence was gone. He knew that night he had lost something money could never buy: credibility. I, on the other hand, felt light, not because they had finally recognized my worth, but because I no longer needed them to. The dignity I had reclaimed didn't depend on anyone's applause. I walked toward the front door. The cold wind blew in as I opened it, carrying the faint scent of pine and the muffled sounds of the city outside. I held the photo tight against my chest and stepped out in silence. Outside, the mansion glowed with its Christmas lights, but to me, that glow no longer held any grandeur. The true light was inside me. I paused for a moment on the sidewalk, took a deep breath. It felt as if the weight of years had finally lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer the man hidden away in the kitchen. I was no longer the invisible father. I was living proof that no one can erase the story carried within. And maybe that was the greatest gift of that night, not for them, but for me. I looked one last time at the house and thought they may have denied me a seat at their table, but the entire table only exists because one day I built it. I smiled to myself and walked away, the winter cold wrapping around me like an embrace of freedom. And now I want to hear from you. Has anyone ever tried to hide you, diminish you, make you believe your story had no value? Share it in the comments. Your voice matters. And subscribe, because every time we share stories like this, we prove that no one has the right to erase anyone's dignity.